want to do is run through a list of what's been happening with Tulsi Gabbard since last night and how the media has painted Tulsi Gabbard, how various people, blue checkmark people, the people who are various journalistic background people have very easily started to smear Tulsi Gabbard. We've seen this. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it on Facebook. I've watched it in clips across media networks. And I want to share a little bit of that with you. For anybody who was working last night, was unable to watch the exchange between Tulsi Gabbard and Kamala Harris, let me bring you up to speed with this.
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response.
As the elected Attorney General of California, I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work. And I am proud of making a decision to not just give fancy speeches or be in a legislative body and give speeches on the floor, but actually doing the work of being in the position to use the power that I had to reform a system that is badly in need of reform.
Did you expect that from Tulsi Gabbard? Had you had interaction about that in the past? And how do you think it went?
Well, I mean, listen, this is going to sound immodest, but I'm obviously a top-tier candidate, and so I did expect that I would be on the stage and take hits tonight because there are a lot of people that are trying to make the stage for the next debate.
Yeah, for a lot of them, it's do or die.
Well, yeah, and especially when people are at 0 or 1% or whatever she might be at. And so I did expect that I might take hits tonight. But, you know, listen, I think that this coming from someone who has been an apologist for an individual, Assad, who has murdered the people of his country like cockroaches. She who has embraced and been an apologist for him in a way that she refuses to call him a war criminal. I can only take what she says in her opinion so seriously. And so I'm prepared to move on.
So, before we even get into the responses, the allegations that Kamala Harris made about Tulsi Gabbard, I want to first for us to take a look at the issues that were raised by Tulsi Gabbard, which is something that I'm not seeing anyone, Anderson Cooper, I'm not seeing Morning Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski, any of these networks that I've seen cover this issue. I haven't seen them focus at all on the allegations that were made about Kamala Harris's record. One of those allegations were marijuana charges. She prosecuted 1,500 marijuana, simple possession charges. And then she joked about smoking marijuana on The Breakfast Club with Charlamagne the God. That's a hypocritical stance, if there ever was one. Someone who incarcerates people for doing something that she herself admits doing, jokingly. No, I guess it's not interesting to Anderson Cooper. It's not interesting to the corporate media to make her answer that question. Well, why couldn't Kamala Harris respond to that question? Death row inmate who was exonerated, DNA proved that he did not commit the crime, but because some paperwork filing that wasn't done within a certain amount of time, Kamala Harris was just fine with this man sitting on death row and possibly losing his life. Seems like the type of an issue that an Anderson Cooper, CNN, and MSNBC, Joe Scarborough would respond to, would at least ask Kamala Harris to respond to. Not only did Kamala Harris not respond to the marijuana question or the question about the death row inmate, She didn't respond to it last night during the debate. And after the debate, sitting here with Anderson Cooper, she dismissed it again. She did not respond to it. And in true corporate media sycophant fashion, Anderson Cooper let her get away with it. Number 3, he incarcerated inmates, kept them longer than their intended time in order to use them as prison labor. Folks, all of these things that we're bringing up, all the things that Tulsi Gabbard brought up at that debate were things that you could Google and see that were brought up by papers of note. These are not obscure conspiracy theories. These are actual points of record from Kamala Harris's record that need to be addressed, that should be addressed, that we've been talking about for months, many of us in independent media. But as you can see here, Anderson Cooper didn't want to hold her accountable for those issues and not even ask her to respond to them. Number 3, bail system. Now, we all know bail system, people being locked up until they can make bail, disproportionately affects who? It disproportionately affects poor people. And since black people tend to be more poor people, on average, due to a lot of issues concerning our, the United States that we talk about daily, that's going to disproportionately affect them. So that bail system that Kamala Harris fought to keep in place was detrimental to the black community and to black, brown people, and white people, anybody who doesn't have money. Why wouldn't Anderson Cooper or anyone else hold Kamala Harris accountable for that? Once again, these are not made-up ideas. These are not allegations of opinion. This is the facts. She fought to keep the bail system in place while activists were trying to get it eliminated, so that more people could get out of jail, not lose their jobs, not lose their homes, some of them not lose their children while they're incarcerated, waiting on bail, waiting to see trial. They haven't been convicted of anything. Bail is about not being convicted of anything, but not having the money to get out until you go have your day in court. So all of these issues that Tulsi Gabbard raised, all factual, all verifiable, none of them smear tactics. None of them pulled out of thin air, all things that any of us could look up, all things that independent media that I've discussed on my channel, many others have discussed these things. Why didn't any of the moderators, not Don Lemon, not Dana Bash, no one made Kamala answer to those questions, but they made sure that Joe Biden did. They made sure that Joe Biden responded to his critiques. Not only did Tulsi Gabbard score points by raising valid questions, valid criticisms that Kamala Harris has still yet to refute. Her version of her way of refuting those accusations was to minimize the person asking those questions and then gaslight about that person. We're not even going to get into if the allegations of a side apologist are accurate or not. We're not going to get into that because that's not germane to the questions that were asked. I'm not even going to entertain that because we first want to deal with the questions that Tulsi Gabbard raised in the debate that for some reason Kamala feels that she's polling too high to care about. So you don't get to, in a democracy, you don't get to say, I don't have to answer your questions because I'm more powerful than you, which is essentially what Kamala Harris's response is. I'm more powerful than you. I'm polling better than you. Therefore, I don't have to respond to your questions. Now, I don't know what kind of a nominee the Democratic Party wants to have leading their party. I don't know what kind of moral high ground they want to stand on, but I fail to see how a person who's unable to respond when asked questions and then points to an elitist tactic like, hey, I'm more powerful, I'm more liked, or I'm bigger and badder than you, how is that going to play with Donald Trump? I'd like to know. So your prosecutor, she's always talking about she's a great prosecutor and she's going to prosecute the case against Donald Trump. Well, what about Donald Trump when he asks you a question like, hey, what about that marijuana? What are you going to say? Are you going to bring up what? You're going to bring up something about Melania Trump? Are you going to answer questions? So my thing is, are we going to answer questions or are we just going to play smear tactic after smear tactic to avoid answering tough questions? Kamala Harris said she expected these lower rung people who aren't on her tier to come after her. Well, if you expected it, Kamala, why weren't you better prepared? If you expected people on a lower tier, similar to you when you came after Joe Biden, because you're not Joe Biden's tier level. So you're not in the Bernie Sanders in Joe Biden area, at least not in my book. I don't see you there. Or in Elizabeth Warren stratosphere, so to speak. You're not on their level. You're in the middle level between them and Pete Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke and people of that ilk. So what were you doing when you were calling out Joe Biden? Were you also looking to get camera time? Were you also trying to make debates? Were you also trying to make a name for yourself? I just find it very hypocritical that when Kamala Harris calls out Joe Biden, it's perfectly fine, and she has an upstanding reason for it, and everything's above board. But when she's called out to defend her own record, now it's a baseless attack. I don't think most of Americans agree with Kamala Harris that this was a baseless attack. But what has now turned into a smear campaign against Tulsi Gabbard has also backfired on Kamala Harris, because here is what people are saying about Kamala Harris. This was what was trending on Twitter. Kamala Harris destroyed. Hashtag Kamala Harris destroyed. This has been trending since early this morning. The only problem I have with this hashtag is I don't think it's actually true. And what I mean by that is, based on everything that I've seen on these networks, what I've seen from the blue checkmark staff of neoliberals who are part of the corporate media infrastructure, who derive paychecks from corporate media or from the DNC or anyway influenced by the DNC, those people do not want Kamala Harris to have to answer for Kamala Harris. And what they've done instead is gone after Tulsi Gabbard with a series of smears. They now say that Tulsi Gabbard is not a congressperson of good standing. They're now not saying that Tulsi Gabbard is a patriot who has served in our military, who put her life on the line numerous times to defend our country and our flag. Now they're calling her a Russian bot. Now she has been put into the soup with Donald Trump. She wasn't a Russian bot when she was a friend of Hillary Clinton before she decided to support Bernie Sanders and step down from the vice chair position at the DNC, though. But now she's a Russian bot because she calls out Kamala Harris. Here goes a clip from The View discussing this earlier today. I don't know if you had a chance to see it.
I thought that Kamala didn't do as well as she did during the first debate because she had that breakout moment in the first debate. But I think she does need to do better in terms of defending her record as a prosecutor, because we are a nation of laws, and that should be a positive as opposed to a negative. And I thought that Tulsi Gabbard wanted to come for her because she is more of a fringe candidate, because her numbers are very low.
The Republicans like Tulsi.
The Republicans like her, and I think she's a real Trojan horse here, because when you look at her record in particular, she's apologized for it, but she was very anti-LGBTQ community. She also has praised Trump for meeting with Kim Jong-un 3 times.
That's why they like her.
She was one of 47 House Democrats who joined her Republican colleagues voting for a measure that would halt Syrian and Iraqi refugees from resettling in the U.S. She's also refused to call Assad a war criminal, and actually
She refused to do it last night.
And she refused to do it last night. And then, per an NBC News report,
Really?
Russian propaganda machines favors Gabbard. So when I look at all of that, I'm concerned that she is attacking Harris, and I'm concerned that she has any traction.
So I agree that her
Well, the
record on
Republicans will start
Assad,
throwing money at her.
I agree that her, when she came on the show, you and I asked her about it, and I believe you brought up Venezuela. I'm not expunging that, but I will say the idea that because she got a really good blow into Kamala and smoked her on an issue, talking about how she put people in jail for smoking weed and then bragged about how she smoked weed on the radio. It was a great line. She landed a big blow on what was the front runner last time. The idea that she's now a Trojan horse is just political
I have a
posturing.
question.
I don't know about that, though. The
she
Trojan horse thing, maybe I'm
Ridiculous.
paranoid, but, after Jill Stein, I am
Right.
paranoid.
That's right.
And there is a ton of... there's a lot of writings on it today on Tulsi, and I like Tulsi. I disagree with her vehemently on foreign policy in particular. But I'm seeing people who used to dislike her tremendously now all of a sudden like her. And there's a lot of writings in things like Russia Today. There's a lot of Russian bot traffic around Tulsi. There's something going on. I suspect it's not knowingly by her because I think she's a decent human being who served this country. But
can I tell you why
I'm paranoid.
I liked parts of her?
Mm-hmm.
Because she's a combat veteran. She's talking about patriotism in a way that I have heard no other candidate other than Biden talk about. She's pro-gun. She's pro-military. She's speaking in a lot of ways that is resonating with Republicans that have. And by the way, did I or do I not make sure that we put in that the gentleman that was poisoned by Putin got in the show because I didn't think it was getting enough publicity in the media. So the idea that I'm somehow watching RT, by the way, I can't even travel to Russia because my family's sanctioned from going there, and I like her at the same time.
Nobody's saying you.
ridiculous.
I'm talking about other people. I mean, just because I'm making a reference doesn't mean it's a reference to you. It would lead to a more constructive behavior if you didn't
But I am in the
take it
Venn
personally.
diagram of what you just said. I am that person. I am a Republican who thinks what she's saying is interesting.
That's why
So
I say the
so that's-
Republicans like her, and they're going to start throwing money at her.
And you know what?
So just
God
keep your eye
forbid
on her
any
out there.
Republicans like any of the Democratic candidates on any way. Just bloodlet every independent and Republican who's curious about any Democratic candidates out. And at the same time, keep attacking Obama and his wife.
I will tell you,
I mean,
her
really
best
winning
friend-
strategy, guys.
Her best friend in
That'll end
Congress
soon.
she used to be very close to Adam Kissinger, a Republican. They were both combat veterans. That
He's
relationship
also a friend
has,
of mine, by the way.
Okay, and he's a friend of mine too. That relationship has ended because of her apologism for Assad, because she went and visited with Assad, because she
I'm
can't
not
call
supporting
him
her.
a
I just think what
monster
she's
and a,
saying
you
is
know,
interesting, and I think that the idea that because she got a big hit on Kamala, now she's a Russian stooge.
We have to make
No,
some
I'm
money.
not saying that.
Somebody has
I'm
to
saying
make money.
I'm paranoid.
What's happening now, y'all?
I mean, does the hypocrisy get any bigger than this? I mean, they're deeply in the waters of hypocrisy right now, and everybody's drowning. I hate the fact that I got to agree with Meghan McCain on this. It just feels weird. I mean, I seldom ever agree with her, and now I have to because, yeah, it does seem a whole lot like she gets a hit on Kamala Harris, and all of a sudden everyone's got their talons out, sharpened. The daggers are coming for Tulsi Gabbard suddenly in a way that's unprecedented.
And I thought that Tulsi Gabbard wanted to come for her because she is more of a fringe candidate because her numbers are very low.
The Republicans like Tulsi.
The Republicans
Now.
like her, and I think she's a real Trojan horse here because
I find it very interesting that Sunny Hostin is using the same language, the exact same language that Kamala Harris used.
This is going to sound immodest, but I'm obviously a top-tier candidate, and so I did expect that I would be on the stage and take hits tonight because there are a lot of people that are trying to make the stage for the next debate.
Yeah, for a lot of them, it's do or die.
Well, yeah, and especially when people are at 0 or 1% or whatever she might be at. And so I did expect that I might take hits tonight.
Is it just a coincidence that Sunny Houston happens to choose the same words? It's amazing because when Tulsi Gabbard was on The View last time, Sunny wasn't talking this way. But all of a sudden now, she's a Trojan horse. She wasn't a Trojan horse in the last debate when she called out, Tim Ryan? I'm just wondering, when did she, I'm just thinking when is a Trojan horse and a plant by Russia, wouldn't that be something that would be like a long-term commitment is all I'm saying. And all I'm saying is this is the second debate. So was she also a Trojan horse? Was she also a plant? Was she also all these negative things? Was she that when she was besting Tim Ryan on the issue of diplomacy, on the issues of regime change, wars, and engagement in Afghanistan and Iraq? Bots exist on the internet for all types of reasons. I have yet to hear anybody provide any evidence that bots are helping Tulsi Gabbard. None. I just call me paranoid, but no, I'll just call you a conspiracy theorist and delusional, Anna Navarro, and devoid of facts. Shouldn't you have to present a fact to make a statement like that? And okay, let's say you're right that there are bots. Why couldn't there be bots pretending to be Russian in order to give you the talking point to discredit Tulsi Gabbard? Couldn't it be the other way is what I'm trying to say. If you say there are bots supporting her. Well, couldn't there be bots who are posing as Russians so that you could be able to then say Russians are helping Tulsi? Couldn't there be a disinformation campaign going on right now that disguises themselves as are looking like Russian bots? So that way you can be able to say Russian bots are helping Tulsi Gabbard. I think that's very much as credible as the allegations that you're making. My theory has no supporting evidence. Neither does yours. But for some reason, you think yours is more valid, and you get to say it on the network channel. You get to say it to millions of people without having any facts. No, before I play my last clip, I just want to point out how repugnant it is that as an African-American man, I have to sit here and defend my dislike for a person who has the background of a Kamala Harris, as if I'm incapable of forming an opinion based on her background. And I also find it repugnant that any black person is unallowed to dislike a prosecutor, an attorney general, whose job was to lock up people and throw away the key. A prosecutor and an attorney general who's on record saying we can't let these incarcerated inmates go because we need to save money on the California budget. She actually said that. If that would have been Joe Biden or Jeff Sessions or basically any white guy, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You would not be fighting for Kamala Harris. You're only fighting for Kamala Harris because she is a brown-skinned woman. If she was anyone else, no one else would have time for her. You would not be saying, oh, we are a country of laws. Sonny would be talking about how those laws are unjust, how those laws disproportionately impact black people and brown people and poor white people. That's what the conversation would be. But since it's Kamala, now you're saying we're a nation of laws. This should be a positive thing that she incarcerated so many people in California to the point where judges had to demand she let some go home early because it was a hazard. Do you know how many people you have to lock up for judges to intervene and say you have to let some go, Kamala? You're just locking up too many people. It's a hazard in our jails because you have so many people incarcerated. It's disgusting. It's hypocritical. It's backstabbing. It's beyond offensive that the narrative is that any black person who does not support Kamala Harris hates themselves, is racist, or hates women, or any of that. Any of it. And you don't even need evidence. They can just throw it against the wall. And it's not in this particular clip from The View, but this is what I've seen repeatedly on Twitter. One of my issues with Kamala Harris, besides all of the other issues, all of the many issues from the non-prosecution of Steve Mnuchin and his rip-off, fraudulent practices that took homes away from working people in California who Kamala Harris just so happens didn't prosecute and just so happens took donations from, who Donald Trump also donated to Kamala Harris's campaign. How many people know that? I wonder if it was anyone else, would it be just tidily swept under the rug? But since it's Kamala Harris, I'm a sexist for bringing it up, and I'm a racist for bringing it up. There are many candidates who are polling not as highly as Kamala Harris. Maybe it has to do with the preferential treatment she gets in the media. Maybe that has something to do with her polling well. But why aren't you calling Jay Inslee and, I don't know, gosh, there's so many of these candidates. Bolton, this is Bolton guy, and de Blasio. All these candidates who are polling under 3% or 2%. Why aren't you calling them fringe candidates? Why is the only fringe candidate, the only candidate I've seen, I've heard you refer to as a fringe candidate is Tulsi Gabbard? I thought maybe there's like 15 candidates all polling. Within what is Amy Klobuchar if not a fringe candidate? What is Kirsten Gillibrand if not a fringe candidate? Why aren't you making the same allegations about Amy Klobuchar? Why aren't you making the same allegations about Bill de Blasio? Why aren't you making the same allegations about all the other candidates who have a vested interest in going after? You know, Bernie Sanders was attacked by 5 or 6 candidates at one time during the second debate. How many of them were called fringe candidates, and how many of them did you accuse of working with the Kremlin? Do you have any evidence at all that Tulsi Gabbard is working with the Kremlin? Now, I hope to interview her soon, and I'm going to ask her, are you working with the Kremlin? Are you friends with Putin? Are you a bot? Do you know any bots? Have you brought any bots? I'm going to ask her that question. But you should have to have some form of evidence to float a theory that way. When she was San Francisco's DA, she had a crime lab scandal where the evidence was tainted, and Kamala Harris didn't want to throw out the tainted evidence. She would have rather risked locking up people for crimes they didn't commit with evidence that was faulty and found to be tainted than to throw out that evidence. What about in the San Francisco, the clergy that she didn't want to prosecute as sexual abusers? What about that? The archbishops and the clergymen who have been hurting children. Kamala Harris decided not to prosecute them. Why didn't she turn over that information to those survivors? I mean, there is a laundry list of issues that we could talk about with Kamala Harris, but it doesn't seem like anybody's interested in talking about them. It seems like all you want to do is find excuses for Kamala Harris, let her ignore based accusations, not even accusations, ignore her own record. And I find it very hypocritical. Now, just to kind of put a cherry on the top with this whole Kamala Harris game that we're playing where I know you are, but what am I? I know you are, but what am I? Thing that she's doing with Tulsi Gabbard, instead of answering questions about her own record, which she has no problem holding Biden accountable for his record 30, 40 years ago, but her own record of 5 years ago is off limits all of a sudden, and anyone who brings up what she did 5 years ago in the last job she had is suddenly a fringe candidate, a Putin bot, or a Putin bot, or some nefarious bad actor. That's what it is. But I want to share with you a clip that solidifies and may offer some insight to those people who want to know why people don't respect Kamala Harris and why people have major questions about her not only being a front runner, but why is she even considering herself to be a progressive?
Okay, so I say with all love and warmth that part of the concern also for people who are progressive thinking and liberal minded, or just progressive thinking in terms of just fix it, is that we all have these posters in our closet that is attached to a stick that we sometimes will card out when we're talking about criminal justice policy and those statistics that you first heard when we opened it up, incarceration. And we run around with these signs, build more schools, less jails. Build more schools, less jails. And we walk around everywhere, build more schools, we protest, build more schools, less jails. Put money into education, not prisons. There's a fundamental problem with that approach, in my opinion. And it's this. I agree with that conceptually, but you have not addressed the reason I have 3 padlocks on my front door.
I find it hypocritical as hell that there are people who consider themselves progressive or liberal or Democrats or whatever you call yourselves. Human beings who are humanitarians, who care about justice and equality, who like to stand on this idea that you are somehow the better party. I have a problem with anybody who can watch that clip and not seethe from the sentiments that are displayed in that clip. This was Kamala Harris 4 years ago, 5 years ago at the most. This is not a different time. This is not a bygone era where she had to work with segregationists. This is in Chicago at a meeting, at Summit, where she laughed and scoffed at the idea that people would want to build less prisons and put more money into education. Progressive thinking and liberal-minded people. Build more schools, less jails. She laughed at the idea of building more schools, less jails. She mocked people who supported the notion. But now, because she's running for the highest office in the land, all of a sudden now she's a progressive. See, this is why it's so problematic having a prosecutor, an attorney general, a DA run to be president. She was law and order just as badly, just as much as you detest Sheriff David Clark, the jackass with the hat, just as much as you detest Rudy Giuliani's tactics of stop and frisk, just as much as you find abhorrent Jeff Sessions, lock him up and throw away the key mentality. You have to hold Kamala Harris responsible and accountable for her same mentality. And don't just tell me it was a job. Maybe, just maybe, folks, cops shouldn't become president, nor should they run for president for a reason, at least not in the Democratic Party. Maybe Kamala just happens to be in the wrong party. Maybe she should be a Republican. They have a lot of room for law and order types. It fits more with who they say they are. Kamala Harris is a faux progressive, in her own words. Now you can say the Russian bots are programming me, or I'm working for Putin if you like, but I didn't make that clip, and Tulsi Gabbard didn't make that clip, and Jill Stein didn't make that clip, or force her to say those things. And I would like to know why me as a black man with black children living in a black neighborhood, why I should support a black candidate who thought it was fine to throw away the key on black children and lock up their mothers if they miss school. I'd like to know why.